They chuckled as I pulled up my weathered truck beside the memorial. Some even gave each other gentle nudges. I caught my sister's whisper. She truly made an impression with that. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I made my way outside. 6 long years. It had been an eternity since I last stepped into Elmswood. If my father hadn't passed away, I would have remained away. That was the silent agreement. I would disappear, and they would act as if I had never been there at all. A brisk wind whisked vibrant leaves into a dance at my feet. November in Virginia always seemed like a lingering ache that wouldn't heal. The sky hung heavy with a slate-gray hue, reminiscent of my mother's eyes, as they locked onto mine from across the field. Her lips formed a tight line, as if preparing for the unexpected. "Claire," she uttered, devoid of warmth. Just my name, stark and imprecise, as if she were pinpointing a blemish on pristine fabric. It would be best to depart immediately, following the service. Let's keep this situation pleasant for everyone involved. The onlookers had gathered, their eyes fixed intently on the scene, unfolding before them. Families clad in dark coats and gleaming shoes huddled together, murmuring softly over warm cups of cider. The steam curling into the crisp air, some offered a faint acknowledgement in my direction, while others completely shunned any form of eye contact. Their gazes were less unsettling than the quiet that enveloped us. Not a single person inquired about my well-being. No one expressed any joy at my arrival. All but Julia. Chi Jen, J Lam Gi. Her voice was melodic, yet her words dripped with a deceptive sweetness that concealed a sharp edge. I looked at her. My sister appeared absolutely stunning in her fitted coat, her makeup subtle and elegant, every strand of hair perfectly in position. She positioned herself beside the town mayor, her hands intertwined, as if embodying the role of a devoted partner in politics. The man next to her was a stranger to me, yet his gaze held a blend of curiosity and judgment that felt oddly familiar. "I arrived to offer my condolences," I stated calmly. "Just like you." Julia let out a gentle laugh. "I wasn't certain if you still recalled the location of Dad's resting place." "I recall it all," I stated, and I certainly did. Each hurtful remark, every label that was thrown my way, each covert mission I undertook, shrouded in secrecy and never to be recognized by anyone. The memorial rose gracefully at the crest of a soft incline. A polished granite wall etched with the names of the town's brave souls who had sacrificed so much. Flags danced gently in the breeze, their colors soft and inviting. At the heart of it all stood the Orion Unit plaque, gleaming and yet somehow unfinished. I ascended the gentle slope, my boots sinking into the damp soil with each careful step. The atmosphere was infused with the earthy aroma of wet grass and the lingering sweetness of wilting roses. I believe my name deserved a place on that plaque. Instead, I discovered his Nathaniel Brandt, the one who abandoned us to the elements, the individual who struck the agreement. The last time I encountered that name, etched in stone, it was within a debriefing report, the final page before my file was sealed, before my name was wiped away. I sensed Julia's presence just behind me. "It's clear that there's no evidence to suggest you were ever involved with Orion. That unit has long since disappeared." "How convenient," I murmured. I moved in a little nearer, my fingers gliding over the etched lines in the stone that were meant to bear my name. That place held significance. It bore a different name now, someone who hadn't sacrificed for the cause, a person who had departed with unblemished hands. "He received a medal," Julia remarked with a hint of pride. "What about you?" "Well, you arrived in that vehicle." I chose not to respond. My hand hesitated against the frigid stone, feeling the weight of untold stories beneath its surface. My truck, now rusted and scratched, held the echoes of a better time, lingering quietly in the distance. It was the final remnant of the life I once knew before everything fell apart. "Before the deception, prior to the cleansing, it would be best for you to leave," Julia remarked, pivoting to leave, "before inquiries arise that you may not be able to address." I watched her leave, her heels slicing the grass with precision. Around me, the ceremony continued, folded flags, shaky salutes, hollow eulogies. My father's name was spoken with honor, but it felt like a script. No one mentioned how he pulled strings to have my name deleted from military records. No one talked about the deal he made to protect someone else's legacy. I stared at the plaque again, at the lies etched in stone. And then, under my breath, I spoke the words I hadn't said aloud in years. I will not let him bury me twice. The town honored Orion Unit like saints, but no one asked who lit the match that burned them down. Photos of folded flags and polished medals lined the walls of my childhood home. The Walsh house hadn't changed, except maybe the paint had faded a bit, and the stairwell creaked louder than I remembered. The smell of old wood and lemon oil filled my lungs as I stepped into the hallway. It was as if grief had been carefully curated and placed behind glass. Not too raw, not too real. In the living room, people whispered between sips of tea, their voices hushed with rehearsed solemnity. A framed portrait of my father sat on the mantel, draped in black ribbon. He wore his dress uniform eyes, proud jaw set with authority. The room buzzed with reverence for a man they believed had died a hero. To them, Thomas Walsh was the one who had preserved honor, who had upheld legacy. No one questioned what that meant. No one looked past the medals. Julia floated through the space like a swan in mourning, elegant, graceful hollow. She paused beside an older couple, placing a hand on the woman's wrist as she shared some comforting memory of our father. Then she saw me. "You look tired," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd come back to the house." "It's still my house," I replied. She blinked. "I suppose." We stood in silence, eyes darting past each other, careful not to touch the raw places. Guests filtered in and out. A local pastor offered kind words about my father's faith, how he loved this country, how he raised 2 daughters with strong principles. That made me want to laugh or scream. Julia clutched a photo of him in his younger days, standing beside a combat vehicle, his hand resting on the shoulder of someone cropped out. I remembered that day. I remembered the way he leaned in, just before the camera clicked, whispering, "You'll never be more than a shadow of this family." I still remember Julia said quietly, holding the picture up for me to see, how he defended us when you made certain choices. What choices were those? I asked, even though I already knew what version of the story she'd been fed. The ones that nearly destroyed everything. But he handled it. He always protected our name, even if it meant taking hard decisions. Hard decisions, like having his own daughter erased from existence. I said nothing. I walked past her into the study. The curtains were still the same heavy, mustard-colored velvet that blocked most of the afternoon light. Dust floated in shafts from the only open window. I sat at the desk. My old laptop was there, tucked into the drawer where I had left it 6 years ago. I powered it on. The screen flickered, then lit up. The encryption software booted almost immediately. The shell was intact, but the core was empty. Every file, gone. Every report, every comm log, every audio transmission wiped clean. Someone had gotten to it. I stared at the loading bar of a dead system, my chest hollow. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't age or decay. Someone had systematically dismantled my life while I was still breathing. Behind me, the murmur of guests dulled to a low drone. I heard my mother's laughter, soft forced, and the clinking of porcelain. The ritual of grieving carried on, polished and precise. I returned to the living room. Julia was standing alone by the fireplace, gazing at our father's portrait. "You're digging again," she said, without turning around. I'm remembering. He was a good man. He did what he had to do. For who? She turned to me, then, eyes sharp. "You shouldn't be here to disturb his legacy." Her voice didn't crack. Her conviction was clean, like a blade, honed over years of belief. I didn't argue. Not now. She wouldn't understand, not yet. She still saw him as a giant. She didn't know he'd used her, just as he used me. Later that night, when the house had quieted and the guests had gone, I sat on the edge of the guest room bed. The moonlight pooled across the floor like spilled milk. I stared at the blank laptop screen beside me. He had taken everything. My clearance, my record, my voice. Claire thought to herself, "He's the one who stole my entire career, and I'm going to take it back one line of data at a time," I whispered to myself. "He stole my entire career, and I'm going to take it back one line of data at a time." You don't just disappear from Orion, not unless someone with stars on their shoulder makes sure you do. I stepped into the Elmswood Public Library, the door creaking like it hadn't been opened in days. The smell hit me first, dust paper, and the faint trace of mildew that clung to small towns and older buildings. It used to be a place of refuge, where I'd spent afternoons reading and tracing the history of people more powerful than I'd ever been allowed to become. Now, I was looking for a ghost, my own. The records computer sat in the corner, outdated, but connected to a limited archive system. I typed slowly. Orion Unit Intelligence Division, terminated 2017. No matches found. I tried again, narrowing the dates. Still nothing. The machine blinked at me, like a judge. Impartial final. Can I help you? The librarian, a woman in her 60s, with wire-rimmed glasses and a red cardigan, appeared at my elbow. I'm looking for records of a disbanded military unit, Orion. She frowned. That doesn't sound familiar. You sure it existed? I was in it. Oh, I'm sorry. Dear, that must be classified. I forced a smile. So I've heard. The screen now displayed a new prompt. Access, restricted code, 7. That wasn't just classified. That was buried. Someone had taken the time to scrub it clean, and not just from public access. I left the library and crossed the street to an old phone booth I used to use as a teenager. The receiver still worked. I dialed Julia's number, half expecting voicemail. She picked up on the second ring. Claire, what's wrong? Do you know who Dad used to meet with during his last year in service? What kind of question is that? The kind that gets people erased, she scoffed. I told you, stop digging. It's over. Dad did what he had to. You screwed up, and he... Did he ever tell you what I supposedly did? There was a pause. Then she hung up. That said enough. Later that afternoon, I found myself back at an old bar, just off Highway 22. It used to be where we drank after missions dull. Greasy food, cold beer, and worse lighting. I spotted him immediately. Harlan. He sat in the corner, eyes sunken, one leg bouncing under the table. Harlan. He looked up, slowly squinting. Claire. I nodded. Damn, he muttered. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. I need information. He let out a hollow laugh. Don't we all? We talked in low tones, over a glass of stale bourbon. He had been part of Orion too, until one day he wasn't. They wiped me. Claire. VA says I never served. You think that's coincidence? Who did this? His voice dropped lower. Ask your father. He's dead. Then maybe he got off easy. Before I could press him, he stood up. I've said too much. As he walked away, I noticed a man at the bar shift slightly. He'd been there when I arrived. He wasn't drinking, just watching. When I left the bar, 10 minutes later, he followed. I took the long way back through the alley behind Marston's Hardware. My boots crunched broken glass and leaves. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. His presence was a cold weight behind me. At the corner of 5th and Maple, I ducked into a narrow alley and slipped into the shadow of a dumpster. The man passed without slowing, scanning the street ahead. I waited until he disappeared, then back. I had no proof yet, but I had instinct, and paranoia was survival. Back at the motel, I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the mini camera rig. I'd used it during recon in Moldova. Motion sensitive, discreet, fully autonomous. I placed it near the front window, aimed it at the street. They wanted to watch too, could play. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number, no caller ID. One new message. You shouldn't have come back. Some of us are still ready to finish what your father started. I stared at the screen, heat flushing through my chest. Threats were cheap, but this felt surgical, personal. They weren't warning me. They were marking me. I reached into my pack and pulled out an old USB drive, encrypted, untouched. Since the fall of Orion, I slipped it into the port of my backup laptop and began sorting files. Half of them were corrupted, but one folder remained untouched. Inside, I found a collection of coordinates, names, dates, operation code names no one should have remembered, and one name I hadn't heard in 6 years, buried in the metadata. The address I typed next wasn't saved anywhere else. No name, no label, just instinct. Claire sent the first packet to a familiar address, no recipient name attached. I sent the first package to a familiar address, no name on it, just a signal. Julia said Dad protected us. I say he protected himself. The Walsh house creaked in the wind like it was trying to expel old ghosts, the kind that wore medals and smiled through lies. I stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, the heat doing little to thaw the chill inside me. Julia entered without looking at me. her robe cinched tight hair, still damp from the shower. She went straight to the fridge, her movements automatic mechanical. The silence stretched long between us. Finally she spoke. Someone called the house. I looked up. Who a man said he used to work with Dad. At Orion, my heart ticked faster. And he said something's about a file. Said it was hidden in a backup server. One Dad said didn't exist. I raised my brow, trying not to show too much. Interesting. Didn't Dad always say there were no survivors? No archives? She nodded slowly. That's what he told me, over and over. I set the mug down, the ceramic clink loud in the quiet kitchen. Maybe he lied. Julia bristled. Don't. Not here. Not now. I leaned against the counter watching her. You remember how he used to teach you intelligence logic? That dumb game where he'd hide coins and make you track the trail? Her jaw tightened. He was training me to think. No, I said. He was conditioning you to believe he was always 10 steps ahead, that he couldn't be wrong. She didn't respond. Instead, she stirred a spoonful of honey into her tea with too much force. You think you're the only one who lost something, she snapped. I lost him too. I lost the father who used to sing Sinatra while fixing the car. The man who taught me how to spot fake smiles at dinner parties. I stepped closer. You didn't lose him. You never saw him. Not really. Her eyes narrowed. And you did. I saw what he did, what he covered, what he erased. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Her gaze darted toward the dark window. Something clicked inside her hesitation. Maybe doubt. I took a breath. He told you there were no backups. But that engineer he knew, what was his name? Harlan. Same one who told me the VA deleted his service file. Julia sat down slowly, hands trembling slightly as she held her tea. The steam curled between us like fog. I decided to push. Does the phrase Viking Zero Protocol mean anything to you? She froze. The mug stopped mid-air. What did you say, Viking Zero Protocol? Her lips parted, but no words came. She stared at me, searching my face for something. Dad? He mentioned that once, I was 12. He thought I was asleep in the back seat. He said it during a call. I remembered it because it sounded like a movie. My voice dropped. It wasn't a movie. It was a purge command. A protocol to wipe clean any operative considered a security risk. One wrong move and the whole system buries you. She whispered. How do you know that it never showed up in anything I read? Not even in his private files. I didn't blink because it's the reason I was erased. Before they erased me, I made sure my truth was buried where even Orion couldn't reach. The rain was steady, a whispering sheet that clung to the windshield of my truck as I turned off the engine. I sat for a beat, watching the dilapidated warehouse loom like a rusted beast against the dark. This place had once been part of a shipping yard. Now it was just forgotten concrete and shadows. Fitting, I grabbed the duffel bag and flashlight, yanked the hood of my jacket tight, and stepped into the downpour. Each step toward the warped wooden door felt heavier. I hadn't been here since the day I disappeared. The key was still taped under the metal vent, right where I'd left it 6 years ago. I slipped it into the lock. It turned with a reluctant groan. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and old dust. But the layout hadn't changed. My boots echoed as I crossed the concrete floor to the far wall where a stack of rotting plywood leaned against rusted beams. I pulled them away, revealing a loose panel of drywall I'd rigged to snap open. Behind it, taped inside a steel lockbox lined with foil, was the SSD. The seal was intact. My fingers hesitated for half a breath before peeling it open. By the time I got back to the truck, soaked through and shivering, the drive was plugged into my laptop. The screen blinked to life, demanding the first of 3 passwords. I typed them in with frozen fingers, a childhood nickname, a number string from an old Orion field report, and the code phrase I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Access granted. A progress bar crawled across the screen as encrypted files unraveled mission logs, surveillance briefs, personnel memos, names I recognized, others I didn't. One file blinked red. Metadata, package level Sigma. Verification required. I clicked it. The window expanded. A line of text signature verification incomplete. Upload authorized encryption key. I cursed under my breath. There was only one key that could unlock this verification. The biometric encryption tied to my father's clearance signature. And that meant I needed Julia. I called her. It rang twice before she picked up. Claire, I need a favor. I figured. She was quiet. I could hear her breathing, the way her fingers drummed against something. What kind of favor? She asked finally. Dad's old access key, the one tied to Orion's Black Level archives. I need you to send it. I shouldn't even have that. But you do. Another pause. Why? Because I need to prove something. And I think you're starting to want the truth. 2. I expected her to hang up. Instead, she sighed. Give me 10 minutes. I waited. 12 minutes later, an email pinged, a biometric trace encrypted with Julia's credentials attached to a coded string I recognized from the family vault. I fed it into the program for a few agonizing seconds. The screen stayed still. Then, signature match. Forged. Original user. Claire Walsh. It wasn't a victory parade. No fireworks. Just a quiet line of truth that cut through 6 years of lies. I exhaled slowly. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Now we start. The truth isn't just dangerous. It's traceable. The motel room stank of mildew and old tobacco. The wallpaper peeled like dried skin, and the buzzing neon sign outside bled red light through the blinds. But it was quiet, forgotten, and that's what I needed. I had tape-printed screenshots and note cards across the walls, maps, names, metadata, timestamps. A hand-sketched floor plan of the old Orion compound. The SSD drive blinked softly on the table beside me, humming like a mechanical heartbeat. A second monitor mirrored encrypted logs in slow-scrolling green. I kept reading. Lines of code. Lines of betrayal. My eyes burned from hours of digging. And just as I leaned back to rub my temples, a file caught my eye. EK. Level 0 access. I froze. That name hadn't been mentioned in years. It wasn't even supposed to exist anymore. Elias Knox. I double-clicked. A series of encrypted entries popped open, each one marked with Orion's internal time codes and secured metadata headers. But it wasn't the kind of access a field agent would have. These were audit logs, activity trails, showing deliberate alterations to my personnel file. The author tag blinked back at me, cold and undeniable. Thomas Walsh. My father's ID, his clearance level, his fingerprint override. He had rewritten my mission record, deleted entire deployments, falsified after-action reports, swapped my name with another operative. There it was, in hex code, in black and white logs, the systematic dismantling of everything I'd earned. The laptop chimed. A video call. Julia. I answered. She appeared in frame, wearing an old hoodie, her eyes wide and damp. Claire. I just opened the folder. I saw his name. I saw what he did. I said nothing. Julia's voice cracked. We can't use this. You'll destroy everything he built. No, I said. He did that himself. I'm just holding up the mirror. Claire. Please, I won't stop. You can. She blinked. For a moment, I thought she'd hang up. Instead, she looked away. What's level 0 access? The kind you bury when you want something to vanish. Another notification appeared, an audio file embedded in the Knox folder. I clicked play. A voice, faint and raspy, came through the speakers. If you're hearing this, then someone finally cracked the seal. Know this, you're not crazy. They built the lie and forced you to wear it. Claire. If it's you, I'm sorry. I tried. They came for me first. It was him, Elias Knox. He sounded tired, beaten, but not broken. The silence afterward was louder than any scream. My inbox pinged an auto-forwarded reply from Kessler. He hadn't sent anything since the night I mailed him the drive. I opened the message. It was short, a single line, followed by a blinking cursor as if he were still typing. Then the line solidified. Are you sure you're ready to follow this all the way? I stared at the screen, then typed back. Do you know Elias Knox? The reply came instantly. I recruited him. You don't shake a ghost like Knox. Not when his trail leads right back to Langley. I sipped the worst cup of coffee I'd had in years and watched the door of the cafe. It was the kind of place you pass 100 times without ever walking in cheap plastic booths. Chipped linoleum and a single humming refrigerator that sounded like it was dying slowly in the corner. Perfect. The burner laptop sat open in front of me, screen dimmed. On it, a new identity blinked into existence. Veritas Node 88. I'd routed the signal through 6 proxies, wiped the metadata, and added digital noise to make it look like it came from somewhere in Indonesia. The encryption was military grade. Nothing traced back to me. I uploaded the audio, Elias Knox's voice, The damaged tone, the names he named. The director knew. So did Thomas Walsh. My fingers hovered over the send key for half a second before I clicked. First to an encrypted drop server, linked to an underground whistleblower forum, the kind journalists monitored but never admitted to. Then, directly to one of them, Avery Lynn, an up-and-coming investigative reporter at WJRV, a local affiliate known for occasionally ruffling the wrong feathers. Avery was young, hungry, and tenacious. I was betting on that. 5 minutes later, I received a reply. This isn't verified. Anyone can fake audio. I sent her the checksum file, the one only someone who'd had level 0 access to Orion's archive could generate. 1 minute passed, then 5, then wait. This matches a deleted Defense Archive signature. How the hell? Who are you? I didn't respond. Instead, I sent her a second clip. Knox again whispering, "They'll bury me like they buried her." Same shovel, same hands. Her typing indicator blinked. Where did you get this? I powered off the laptop. Back in the motel, I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by maps and printed documents. The TV was on low volume. Local news anchors still smiled through weather reports and sports scores, blissfully unaware of what was coming. My phone vibrated. Kessler, make it loud, but make it clean. I didn't respond. Instead, I reopened the anonymous forum. Within the hour, Knox's recording was the top voted post. The comment thread had exploded. This is real. Someone dig deeper. Cover-up confirmed. Dozens of users began cross-referencing locations. Times background noises in the tape. Just past midnight, I flicked on the news again. And there it was. Breaking whistleblower alleges Orion tampering below the Chiron. A blurred image of my father in uniform, taken from some old military parade. Julia's favorite picture. It faded into footage of Knox, one of the few stills they could recover from before his accident. Julia called. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched from the shadows as the world began to crack. Somewhere across town, Julia sat in her bedroom staring at the screen. I knew it before I saw the message. She sent a single word. Why I didn't have the heart to reply. My phone vibrated again. New message. No text, just GPS coordinates. I stared at them, heart pounding. They were only 30 miles out, deep in the woods. Whoever sent them hadn't signed the message. But I had a feeling they were inviting me into the fire. You can't put the truth back in the box once it's breathing. The forest swallowed the road behind us, tall pines closing in like sentinels. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the mist, illuminating only what we needed to see. Just enough to keep going, not enough to feel safe. Julia gripped the handle of the truck door tighter than necessary, her breath fogging the window. You really think someone sent that to help us? I think I said someone wants to see what we'll do next. The coordinates had brought us here, a rusted-out side road gated and locked, leading to a facility we both thought was gone. Orion's auxiliary training base decommissioned, supposedly cleared. But even from a distance, I could tell the fences hadn't been repaired. The cameras hadn't been replaced. And yet, there's fresh tire tracks, Julia whispered. We climbed the fence under the cover of wind and creaking branches. The main gatehouse stood empty, glass cracked like a spiderweb, the American flag above it torn and flapping. Inside, everything was covered in dust and silence, except for the footprints, 4 sets recent heading in opposite directions. The control room was just as I remembered. Low ceilings, concrete floors, thick steel doors half open on rusted hinges. The scent of mold clung to the air. But there in the corner was the server rack, or what was left of it. I knelt and brushed dust away. The old data backup drive was jammed in upside down on purpose. No one does that accidentally. It was meant to be missed, but not really missed. Not if you were looking. Julia crouched beside me, wide-eyed. That's an Orion certified drive. Military grade. I nodded. And someone planted it a week ago. She stiffened. If Knox died 6 years ago, who left this good question? We powered up the handheld reader, and the drive blinked back to life. The screen showed a partial file directory, dozens of system logs, data comparisons, draft files. One of them, Viking Zero Protocol. PDF. It was corrupted, only half readable, charred edges from what looked like an intentional burn. Someone had tried to destroy. It failed. And then just left the rest behind. Claire Julia whispered, pointing to the wall. A notebook, half buried behind an overturned locker. I pulled it free and opened it carefully. Inside were short, hurried notes, symbols, codes. Times, Knox's handwriting. He had been here. Maybe not recently, but definitely once. And then movement. A sound behind the door. We froze. Two men dressed like utility workers pushed open the far entrance. I saw the bulge under one of their jackets. Military sidearm. We ducked out the emergency exit just in time. Adrenaline carried us across the back lot, through brush and mud, back to the fence. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. They just wanted us to know they were watching too. Back at the truck, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The folder labeled CCTV cache flickered open. Only one file, 1 week old. The screen brightened, and a grainy recording began. A man entered the server room wearing a dark coat, pressed slacks. Business, not military. He moved with calm precision, placing the drive, adjusting a loose camera cable, turning once toward the lens. The picture clarified just enough. I recognized the lapel pin first. CIA, then his face. Kessler. Julia gasped. But he's retired. You said he left. I stared at the screen. He never left. He's been watching everything. They hit back harder when they know you're close. I sat on the edge of a sagging motel mattress, cracked screen, flickering in the half-dark as the Orion Foundation seal filled every channel. A podium gleamed beneath surgical lights. Behind it stood their public relations director. Impeccable charcoal suit voice, smooth as a scalpel. Recent allegations regarding retired Brigadier General Thomas Walsh in the Orion Unit are categorically false. She purred. We regret that certain individuals, whose credibility is at best questionable, have chosen to exploit a family tragedy for personal gain. She tapped a clicker. Video rolled. First, shaky helmet footage of a training convoy dust shouted orders. Familiar faces blurred for security. Then the image froze, zoomed onto me, sweat-streaked, giving a hand signal. A bright flash flared screen, cutting to static. When the picture returned, a Humvee burned in the background. The narrator claimed I had staged the explosion to sabotage the mission and pin the blame on my own commanding officer. They rewound, slowed, highlighted the shadow of a trigger device they insisted I planted. It was clever use, genuine Orion clips, stitch them with doctored frames, leave just enough truth to sell the lie. Julia hunched beside me, gripped her coffee so hard the styrofoam bent. That's not how it happened, she whispered, voice shaking. I was in middle school, but I remember you calling that night you were injured. You saved calm, I said though. My pulse hammered. They're not talking to people who remember. They're talking to people who never knew. On screen, the PR director continued. We'll be pursuing legal remedies against Ms. Walsh for defamation and unauthorized release of classified material. Julia's phone exploded with notifications, headlines, voicemails, reporters, camping our social feeds. A text from our mother flashed, "Stop this. You are tearing what's left of this family apart. That is not my daughter on the news." Julia's cheeks blanched. She thinks you're lying. No, I murmured. She needs to think I'm lying. Safer that way. Outside tires crunched on gravel. Shadows moved beneath the orange glow of the motel sign. Same sedan I'd clocked at the gas station earlier. Tinted windows engine, idling just long enough to confirm room number, then gliding away. Pack, I said. We stuffed printouts. Drives the battered laptop into duffels. Julia's hands trembled so violently, she dropped a stack of Knox's notes. I scooped them up. Rain hammered the roof as we killed. The light slipped out the back and climbed into the truck. 2 miles down the highway, I spotted the sedan merging behind us. I turned off the main road onto a service lane and killed my headlights. The sedan sailed past oblivious red taillights, shrinking into the storm. For the next 48 hours, we drifted cheap rest stops, diners that took cash, neon motels whose clerks never looked up. Every newsfeed recycled Orion's statement. Panelists dissected my history of insubordination, flashed the footage again and again. Julia scrolled in silence, eyes red, lip chewed raw. Once she blurted, "What if they're right and people don't care about evidence? What if the lie is easier?" "We don't need everyone," I answered. "We need the right ones." But even Kessler had gone silent. My last 3 encrypted messages showed delivered unread. Maybe Langley finally clipped his wings. Maybe he'd decided I was collateral. On the second night, we sheltered in an abandoned way station, concrete floor, still smelling of diesel. Wind rattled metal shutters. My breath fogged in the dark. I checked the perimeter cameras I'd planted outside static. Safe for now. Julia sat against the wall, hoodie pulled to her chin. They called my office, she said. Told them I'm under investigation, suspended until further notice. I crouched beside her. I can put you on a bus tonight. Disappear until this breaks. She shook her head, eyes fierce, despite fatigue. He lied to me my whole life. Let him feel what it's like to be doubted. Dawn crept pale through broken panes. Rain had stopped. I powered the satellite hotspot, skimmed a dozen hate articles, then refreshed my inbox out of habit. New mail from Kessler. No greeting, no preamble, just a single line. You have 1 move left in 1 place. An attachment followed a BTX containing coordinates and a brief instruction. Langley, Gate 9, 11:45 a.m. No delays. I showed Julia. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant, like the sky rehearsing a verdict. We had less than 6 hours to decide if we walked into the lion's den or if the lion still remembered our names. Langley, Gate 9, 11:45 a.m. No delays. They burned my name. Now I'll burn their silence. Langley didn't look like the epicenter of a cover-up. At least not from Gate 9. No flags, no security theater, just a silent guard in plain clothes who scanned my face longer than necessary, then nodded once like he'd been waiting years for the match to strike. No badge, no name, just a beep, a buzz, and a door unlatched. Julia stayed behind in the truck, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. She didn't speak when I left, but her eyes asked all the questions. The corridor beyond was windowless, sterile, and silent. Every sound I made felt intrusive. The tread of my boots, the faint click of the USB drive in my pocket, the steady drumline of my pulse. The guard didn't follow. The door behind me shut with a whisper. I was alone until the next one opened. Kessler stood in a cramped room, furnished only with a table, 2 chairs, and a terminal, sealed in an EMP-hardened case. He hadn't aged well. His salt and pepper beard had lost the pepper, and his eyes, once sharp, like glass, had dulled to something closer to ash. But the voice was the same, calm, final. I told you only to use this door when the storm was already inside. It's flooding, I replied. He motioned for me to sit. I didn't. He opened a briefcase, withdrew a drive, sealed in biometric plastic, then placed it on the table between us. He didn't slide it, didn't gesture. This is what Knox left with me, buried under layers. Even I wasn't meant to touch. I've decrypted most, but not all. That's your job. I picked it up. He let me. Why now? I asked. Because you forced the door open, and now it can't be shut. Because the public thinks you're either a traitor or a ghost, and both are useful until the truth walks in. I connected the drive to the terminal. His access cleared the shield, and the display blinked awake with a secure audio log titled TW Redline Final. The voice was unmistakable. My father. I did what was necessary. Claire should never have been in the Orion project to begin with. She was unstable, too compassionate. We would have lost 6 instead of 1. I rerouted the commendation, rewrote the record. She doesn't belong in that history. My hands curled into fists. Kessler said nothing. Next file, a personnel breakdown. Code names, mission ratings. My real file, 5 extractions, 3 confirmed rescues, and a final mission where I absorbed the blast radius that should have killed 2 more. Labeled risk factor. Reassigned, then removed. They hadn't just erased me. They had built a replacement myth using the bones of my truth. I have everything I need, I said. Not quite, Kessler replied. You have evidence. What you need is timing. He leaned forward, folding his hands. Next week, Memorial Hall, District Square, the annual Orion Remembrance. Veterans officials, the press, every agency that ever cleaned up after dirty hands. You'll speak. I narrowed my eyes. You think they'll hand me a mic? No, he said, but they won't be able to unplug the feed once it starts. He tapped a hard copy itinerary. listed beside the keynote speakers, unassigned whistleblower, protected status. I stared. That's a bluff. It's a wedge, he said. Use it. And what happens after? Then they discredit you, bury the story, or try to flip it. But it'll already be out. The files will be public. The people who need to know will. He stood and opened the door. Don't aim to be a hero, he said. Be the one who survives long enough to make the lie expensive. I stepped into the corridor. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, Julia stood beneath a flickering lamppost hood pulled over her head. Well, she asked. I held up the drive. We go public. When I looked out at the dark horizon, fog laced the trees beyond the perimeter. The rain was coming back steady. Deliberate. Let's end it where it started. The day they meant to honor silence. I chose to speak. I stood outside the Federal Memorial Convention Hall, the air thick with November chill and pretense. Julia stood beside me, pale but resolute. She hadn't said much since we'd driven through the gates. She didn't need to. The silence between us had weight now. Not avoidance, but alliance. Inside the hall was already full. Military brass government dignitaries rose of suits. From Orion Foundation journalists, with press badges, clipped like shields to their chests. It was a theater of solemnity dressed in patriotism. Flags everywhere. A somber string quartet, large screens pulsing with the Orion Unit insignia, an emblem I once wore with pride and now carried like a wound. I wore my old uniform, tailored to fit, but its creases didn't hide the years or the scars. The moment I stepped inside the room, stirred. Heads turned. Whispers slipped through the air like smoke. Isn't that Claire Walsh? I thought she's not supposed to be here. Julia tightened her grip on my arm. I kept walking. Front and center behind the podium stood Thomas Walsh, my father, dressed in dignified black ribbon, pinned to his chest like a medal he didn't earn. His eyes scanned the room and faltered, just a beat when they found me. A flicker. But then the mask reset. The ceremony began. Speeches were given. The Orion legacy was praised with polished lies. A video montage rolled smiling faces of the fallen faded clips from training exercises. Not one frame included me. Then Thomas stepped up to speak. My brothers and sisters in service. He began voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. Today, we remember not just those we lost, but what they stood for. Honor, sacrifice, integrity. I felt Julia tremble beside me. I placed a hand over hers steady. He continued wrapping his eulogy in metaphor and myth, words polished like tombstones. His final line landed. Orion was a beacon in our darkest hours, and its light still guides us. The hall applauded. I rose. There was no cue, no announcement, just the scrape of my chair and the echo of my boots on marble. The crowd hushed. I request the floor, I said loud enough to cut through the silence. As a former member of Orion and a living witness. Gasps. A panelist stammered. Miss Walsh. This isn't Kessler, seated near the back, gave a nod. Behind the screens, a quiet technician moved. The displays flickered. A different file loaded. Not the approved slideshow. The screen went black. Then file origin, EQ level, 0. An audio log played. Knox's voice. If this reaches the surface, it means someone survived. Someone chose truth over protection. Murmurs rippled. The screen flashed images, redacted reports. Metadata overlays my real mission logs. Then the voice of Thomas Walsh. If Claire speaks out, she drags us all down. Erase her. It echoed. Erase her. It didn't matter if anyone looked at me. The damage was already done. On-screen overlays showed document alterations. My service record original and tampered. Knox's final video log. Kessler sealed authentication. Silence fell. One by one, heads turned from the screen to Thomas. He didn't move, but I saw it. The twitch in his jaw, the way his hands clasped tighter. His eyes scanning not for explanation, not for confrontation, but for escape. Julia began to cry, not from confusion, but clarity. And across the room, the truth took its first breath in public. The lie didn't die quietly. It screamed. At first, the hall stood still, shocked into silence, frozen under the weight of the evidence playing across every screen. The voice of Thomas Walsh, caught in unfiltered audio, still echoed faintly in the speaker's erase her. But silence has a breaking point. A reporter from the third row rose, her phone already live streaming. Are these recordings authenticated? Before anyone could answer, Kessler stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. His badge glinted. They are verified through federal chain of custody protocols. Encryption matches Orion's own archival system. Gasps, murmurs. The crowd unraveled. The director of Orion, seated 2 rows behind Thomas, leaned forward. Mr. Walsh, is this true? Thomas stood, stiff. His hands trembled just slightly at his sides. These tapes are misleading. Edited. Taken out of context. I never ordered the removal of anyone from service unjustly. Claire didn't move. She didn't need to. Kessler tapped his tablet. The screen shifted again, this time to a list. Operation logs. Anomalies. Redacted sections now fully visible. 3 more names, each marked with the same code as Claire's risk factor. Reassigned. Non-viable. A voice from the audience cracked the air. I know that label, a man said. He stood older, uniformed voice shaking. They used that same designation when they canceled my medical benefits. After Orion shut down my access, they said I was never part of the unit. Claire turned. He looked at her, eyes wide, seeing not a myth, but an echo of his own past. You're not the only one, he said, his voice rising. I was erased too. Reporters surged forward. Julia stood. Her expression wasn't anger. It was devastation. She turned to her father. You told me you protected us. You told me she was dangerous. Her voice cracked. But the only danger was you. Thomas tried to interrupt. Julia, I did this to shield. No, she snapped. You did it for yourself, to keep your record clean, to keep your legend intact. She looked at Claire. Her sister didn't speak, didn't move. Another voice joined. Avery Lynn, now broadcasting live. Claire Walsh, what would you like to say on the record? Claire turned slightly, facing the cameras. Her voice was calm, low. They say history is written by the victors, but when those victors cheat, erase, silence, falsify, they don't write history. They delay the truth. Gasps rippled again. Then another screen lit up. A live broadcast picked up nationally. Avery's feed. The microphone on stage still hot. Every syllable was being transmitted. Thomas stepped forward, desperate now. You don't understand the burden we carried, the decisions we had to make. Kessler's voice cut through, sharp and firm. You made those decisions alone, behind closed doors, with no oversight. That ends today. The room vibrated with tension. And then came the final blow. The voice of Senator Hargrove, seated quietly near the rear, rose above the noise. I move for an immediate federal inquiry. There is clear evidence of systemic cover-up and abuse of classification authority under the Orion mandate. Panic took root. Thomas turned toward Claire. His face had collapsed no longer. The confident architect of lies, but a man cornered by consequences. His mouth opened, but no words came. Just his eyes pleading. Claire stared back. For a moment, everything around her blurred: the press, the veterans, the storm of questions. All she saw was the man who raised her and buried her. She didn't speak. She didn't nod. She simply turned her back and walked away. They built their legacy on ash. Now they watch it burn. The marble steps of the federal building glistened under a November drizzle, as if the storm had spilled from the sky onto the steps of power. News vans lined the curbs. Journalists held umbrellas in one hand and microphones in the other. Over the courthouse door, 2 new signs had been posted overnight: Department of Defense Special Investigation Tribunal. And beneath it, in bold red, closed session in progress. Inside, Kessler sat behind a paneled desk, facing a semicircle of suited officials. His voice was calm, but edged with years of restrained fury. Yes, he said. Knox sent me the packet. Yes, I verified it. And no, I didn't speak up. Not because I didn't want to, but because the people in this room wouldn't have let me. The room fell into a hush. Someone scribbled a note. Outside, Julia sat in the waiting lounge, her coat still damp, arms crossed. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Claire stood a few feet away, watching the live transcription on a monitor. Line by line, the truth surfaced. 1 hour later, the committee's decision rolled out like thunder. Effective immediately, the individual known as Thomas Walsh is suspended from all advisory and consultative roles. A full court-martial investigation has been initiated. The Orion Foundation's federal funding is frozen pending audit. The words echoed even after the speakers clicked off. That evening, Claire and Julia returned to Claire's apartment, a modest 2-bedroom unit on the edge of town, long untouched and silent. Claire had barely stepped foot inside, since she'd left 6 years ago. Dust hung in the corners. A cracked photo frame lay on the windowsill. Her in uniform, half of her face scratched out by time or bitterness. Julia placed her suitcase in the guest room without a word. When she returned, Claire handed her a mug of tea. "You don't have to stay here," Claire said softly. "I know," Julia replied, "but I don't want to be in that house." A pause. "I used to think Dad was the compass, the constant," she added. "Turns out, he was the distortion." Claire didn't answer. She didn't need to. Across the country, newspapers carried the same headline: "The Ghost Who Spoke." Claire Walsh breaks silence. Cable channels ran montages. Claire in grainy military footage, juxtaposed with the blazing clips from the tribunal. In one segment, a whistleblower advocacy group called her the most significant voice silenced by Orion's shadow ops. She didn't watch. Instead, she opened a file folder labeled Unresolved Cases and began highlighting lines that referenced other manipulated personnel files. Julia walked over and pointed at one. "That's Sergeant Hoyle. Dad said he resigned. He was forced out," Claire replied. Their work stretched into the night, two sisters combing through a decade of deception. Meanwhile, in the hallway of Orion's headquarters, once a fortress of command, the lights flickered. Offices were being cleared, desks emptied. A single sign remained taped on a door: administrative leave, indefinite. Back in Elmswood, Claire stood before her childhood home. She didn't go inside. Through the lace curtains, she could see her mother standing still, unmoving, watching the street. She didn't wave. Neither did Claire. Claire whispered to herself, more to the air than anyone listening. Some ghosts stay, some choose to leave. She turned away before her reflection disappeared in the glass. Justice doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like survival. Claire sat in her new apartment, no longer a hiding place, but a space carved from clarity. The shelves were lined with books, a few framed photos, and a single, small plaque. Lieutenant Claire Walsh, Orion Unit, beneath a folded flag. She didn't hang it. Julia did. Outside, the rain had slowed. Inside, Claire typed with quiet resolve the title on the first page: A Race to be Remembered. She had no publisher, no deadline, just the need to tell it all, from the days of shadow briefings to the moment her name vanished from the servers. The betrayal, the loss, the survival. Her fingers moved steadily like a heartbeat. Julia entered the room holding a letter. She hesitated before offering it. "It's from Mom," she said. Claire took it without expression. The envelope was plain, no return address. Inside a single line, "Con van sang me bieta la ju." Claire read it once, then again. No apology, no explanation, just a distant acknowledgement from a mother who had never quite known what to do with a daughter like her. She folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. Later that afternoon, Claire drove quietly to the Knox Memorial Grove, a modest plot near the edge of town. The air smelled like cedar and rain. A single bench faced the plaque, etched with Elias Knox's name and no rank, no title, just a date of death. In silence, she placed a small bouquet at the base. "You saw me when I couldn't see myself," she whispered. No wind answered, but somehow she felt heard. Back in town, Kessler called. She let it ring once before answering. "They've offered a protection program," he said. "New identity, new location." "I'm done hiding," Claire replied. "They hid me enough for a lifetime." Kessler didn't push. He simply replied, "Then make your voice heard." 2 days later, in the CIA's internal conference room, Claire faced a panel of seasoned veterans and intelligence officials. Avery Lynn sat beside Julia, transformed from a journalist chasing stories into a steadfast friend who remained long after the excitement had subsided. Claire expressed herself with clarity, calm and composed, simple and straightforward. "Only the truth." "I didn't return to ruin Orion," she stated. "I returned because I refused to fade away. I also wished for others to remain visible." A soft wave of consensus flowed through the gathering. Then the chairman leaned in closer. His gaze held a warmth that was both inviting and piercing. "Lieutenant Claire Walsh," he mentioned. She adjusted her posture, a familiar tension coursing through her as she held her breath. He offered a warm smile. "Welcome back." "Dear reader, they referred to me as a specter. Yet, spirits remain eternal. They linger in the shadows. The spring banners fluttered against the sky, embodying a spirit of resilience. Flags adorned the stage of the military academy, their hues vibrant and steadfast beneath the bright morning sun. Rows of cadets, in crisp uniforms, sat with straight backs, their polished boots reflecting the promise of bright futures ahead. Claire stood behind the podium, her fingers gently grazing its edge. The medals she once held dear had found their way back to her, her identity reclaimed. Yet she adorned herself with none of it at this moment. A simple navy blue suit paired with a silver compass-shaped pin, she surveyed the crowd. Julia sat 3 rows back, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, a quiet sense of pride swelling within her. A small live stream icon flickered in the corner of the cameras, positioned along the aisles. On the distant side, Kessler observed intently. He never promised he would. He really didn't need to. Claire inhaled deeply and started to speak. "Once, I found myself in your position," she remarked. "I possessed a document, a position, a reason, a moment of stillness. Then one day, the file disappeared, and my name vanished, not due to my shortcomings, but rather because I posed the incorrect question at an inopportune moment." The cadets stood quietly, their attention fully captured. In those years of quiet reflection, I discovered something profound. Bravery often whispers softly. At times, it's the gentle murmur that reassures. I remain present. She chose not to speak of her father. There was no necessity for that. The weight of his name had finally become as light as her own. "They told me I was an error," she confided. "However, I was not. I found myself in an awkward situation. They wiped me from existence." She gazed at their expressions, vibrant and attentive, brimming with untouched dreams. "However, the reality of the situation is this. Even if your record indicates you're no longer here, your essence continues to thrive. And if you persevere long enough, eventually someone will hear you." She concluded her address with a poignant excerpt from her memoir. "To those who have been overlooked, I acknowledge your presence. To those who have been unheard, I am listening. The spirits they attempt to conceal continue to linger. Because we endure, we hold on to our memories, and now they understand as well." Quietude, then a gradual wave of applause, then rising, a tribute that transcends mere sympathy or formalities. Yet, it is about acknowledgement. Julia's cheeks glistened with tears. Claire offered her a subtle nod before gracefully descending from the stage. As she strolled down the aisle, a young cadet, not yet 20, with eyes that gleamed like polished metal, stepped forward, anxious, resolute. "Excuse me, ma'am, would you be willing to take a look at my situation?" Claire acted without a moment's pause. Her lips formed a gentle, yet unwavering smile. "I have already taken care of that." The individuals who sought to erase her legacy now find themselves overshadowed by the very consequences of their own deceit. Claire emerged stronger from their betrayal. She transformed the conclusion they believed was set in stone, for when injustice confronts steadfast bravery, the ultimate judgment can resonate for eternity. No facade can endure indefinitely when confronted by the relentless force of honesty. If this narrative resonated with you, please like and share your thoughts below. Type 1 if you felt the injustice profoundly, or 2 if you think the struggle is still ongoing.